The summer sun beat down mercilessly on Cedar Falls, Montana Territory, casting long shadows across the dusty main street where justice was about to be served with a leather whip. Samuel Morrison stood, shackled to the wooden post in the town square, his shirt already torn away, revealing the lean, work-hardened frame of a man who'd known labor since boyhood. 22 years old, with sandy brown hair and steel-gray eyes that refused to show fear, Sam kept his gaze fixed on the distant mountains rather than the gathering crowd. The folks of Cedar Falls had come to see their weekly entertainment, a public flogging that Judge William Thorne insisted would maintain order in these lawless times. Samuel Morrison, Sheriff Tom Bradley, called out, reading from a crumpled paper, "You stand convicted of assault upon Mr. Jeremiah Blackwood, disturbing the peace and interfering with lawful business. Judge Thorne sentences you to 20 lashes, to be carried out immediately." Sam closed his eyes briefly, remembering the events that had brought him here just 3 days ago. He'd been walking past Brennan's General Store when he heard the commotion. In the alley, Jeremiah Blackwood, the largest cattle rancher in 3 counties, had a small Mexican boy pinned against the wall, his meaty fist raised to strike again. "Please, Senna," the boy had pleaded in broken English. "My mama, she is very sick. I only take bread. You take from me, you pay the price, you little thief." Blackwood had snarled, bringing his fist down hard across the child's face. That's when Sam had stepped in. "That's enough," he'd said quietly, his hand moving to Blackwood's thick wrist. "Boy's just hungry. Ain't no call to beat a child half to death." Blackwood had turned, his face red with rage and whiskey. "This ain't your concern, Drifter. Move along before you find yourself in trouble. I reckon it became my concern when you started beating on someone a quarter your size." The confrontation had escalated quickly. When Blackwood swung at Sam, the younger man had defended himself, landing a solid punch that sent the cattle baron sprawling into the mud in front of half the town. The humiliation had cost Sam dearly. Now, as the crowd murmured and pointed, Sam spotted the boy he'd defended, standing with his mother near the mercantile. The woman's dark eyes were filled with tears and guilt, and Sam offered her the slightest nod. He'd do it again, consequences be damned. 20 lashes, no more, no less, Sheriff Bradley announced, taking up the leather whip. "Doc Henderson will be standing by." In the crowd, Lucas Thorne watched from beneath the brim of his black hat, his jaw clenched tight. At 20, he was the most successful lawyer in Cedar Falls, educated back east and groomed to follow in his father's footsteps. But something about this punishment sat wrong with him, had been eating at him since the trial. Sam Morrison had defended a child from a bully, and for that, he was about to be flayed alive in front of the whole town. Where was the justice in that? Judge William Thorne appeared beside his son, his weathered face impassive beneath his white beard. "Good to see you witnessing justice being served. Is it justice, Father?" Lucas asked quietly. 20 lashes for defending a hungry child. The judge's pale blue eyes hardened. "Justice is maintaining order. Blackwood provides jobs for half this town. Morrison is a drifter with no stake in our community." The choice was simple. Lucas studied his father's profile, seeing the rigid set of his jaw that had terrorized courtrooms for 30 years. Sometimes he wondered if the man had any compassion left in him, or if it had been burned away by decades of frontier life. The first lash cracked across Sam's back, drawing a line of blood and a grunt of pain that he quickly stifled. The crowd fell silent except for the sound of leather meeting flesh. By the 10th lash, Sam's back was a mess of welts and blood, but he hadn't cried out once. His hands gripped the post so tightly his knuckles had gone white, but his head remained high. Lucas found himself counting each strike, feeling each one like a physical blow to his own conscience. This wasn't justice, this was vengeance, dressed up in legal robes. When the 20th lash finally fell, Sam sagged against the post, but remained standing. Doc Henderson hurried forward with his medical bag, while Sheriff Bradley unlocked the shackles. "Justice is served," Judge Thorne announced. To the crowd, "Let this be a lesson to any who would challenge the peace of Cedar Falls." As the crowd began to disperse, Lucas watched Sam Morrison struggle to remain upright while the doctor tended his wounds. There was something about the young man's bearing, his refusal to break under punishment, that reminded Lucas of someone he just couldn't remember who. That night, while his father celebrated another successful demonstration of justice with Jeremiah Blackwood over cigars and whiskey, Lucas found himself unable to sleep. He kept seeing Sam Morrison's face, the set of his jaw, the color of his eyes that looked remarkably similar to the ones Lucas saw in the mirror every morning. For the first time in his life, Lucas Thorne began to wonder if his father had been keeping secrets that went far deeper than mere corruption. Dr. Marcus Henderson's small clinic behind Main Street had seen its share of frontier violence, but the young man laid face down on his examination table, presented wounds that spoke of more than just rough justice. As he cleaned Sam Morrison's torn back, the doctor couldn't help but notice the old scars that crisscrossed the newer injuries. "Son, these old marks on your shoulders," Doc Henderson said gently, applying salve to the fresh whip marks. "What happened to you?" Sam turned his head slightly, his gray eyes distant. "Work accident at a lumber camp up in Oregon Territory. Tree came down wrong when I was 16. The doctor nodded, but Lucas Thorne, standing quietly in the doorway, noticed something else in those scars, a distinctive crescent-shaped mark just below Sam's left shoulder blade. It was the kind of birthmark that ran in families. Lucas had the exact same mark. "Doc, is he going to be all right?" Lucas asked, stepping into the room. Sam tried to turn to see who was speaking, wincing at the movement. "Don't need charity from no fancy lawyer," he muttered. "It's not charity," Lucas replied firmly. "It's what any decent man would do." Doc Henderson finished bandaging Sam's back and helped him sit up slowly. "He'll heal, but he needs rest and proper food. These wounds could fester in this heat." "I'll manage," Sam said, reaching for his torn shirt. "Where will you stay?" Lucas asked. "Mrs. Patterson kicked you out of the boarding house after the trial." Sam's jaw tightened. "I'll find some place. The stable behind my office has a clean room upstairs. You can stay there while you recover." Both Sam and Doc Henderson stared at Lucas in surprise. It was unusual, to say the least, for a prominent lawyer to offer shelter to a man who'd just been publicly whipped. "Why?" Sam asked suspiciously. "What's in it for you?" Lucas studied the young man's face, noting again the familiar set of features. "Maybe I believe in justice, real justice, not the kind that gets handed out with a whip." That evening, as Sam settled painfully into the small room above Lucas's stable, he wondered about the lawyer's motives. In his experience, men with money and education didn't help drifters without expecting something in return. Meanwhile, in the judge's study, Lucas confronted his father with questions that had been building all day. "Father, tell me about Samuel Morrison. Where does he come from?" Judge Thorne looked up from his legal documents, his pale eyes sharp. "What concern is that of yours? I'm curious about his background. For a drifter, he carries himself with considerable dignity. Dignity doesn't pay debts or build towns. Lucas the boy is nobody, from nowhere." But Lucas noticed his father's hands had gone still on the papers, and the older man's voice carried a slight tension that hadn't been there moments before. "What about his family? Did that come up in the trial?" "His father died in some farm accident years back. Mother died of consumption. He's been on his own since he was 17 or 18. Judge Thorne's answers came quickly, too quickly, as if he'd memorized them. "And before that, where was he born?" Judge Thorne set down his pen and fixed his son with a stern look. "Lucas, what is this fascination with a convicted criminal? Your time would be better spent on matters of importance." That night, Lucas couldn't shake the feeling that his father was hiding something. He'd seen that evasive look before, usually when conversations turned to the judge's life before coming to Montana Territory. The next morning, Lucas found Sam sitting outside the stable, carefully cleaning a small photograph that had obviously seen better days. The image showed a young woman with dark hair and kind eyes, standing beside a modest farmhouse. "Your mother?" Lucas asked. Sam nodded, his expression softening. "Sarah Morrison took this picture the year before she died. She was ... She was a good woman, deserved better than the hand life dealt her." "What about your father?" Sam's face hardened. "Never knew him. Mama said he was from back east, came through for a summer and made promises he didn't keep. Left her with a baby and no way to support herself." Lucas felt his heart skip a beat. "Do you know his name?" "Mama never talked about him much. Said it was better forgotten." Sam folded the photograph carefully and tucked it into his shirt pocket. "Only thing she ever told me was that he was a lawyer, and that someday I might meet him and not even know it." The words hit Lucas like a physical blow. He stared at Sam Morrison, really seeing him for the first time, the shape of his face, the set of his shoulders, the way he held himself even when injured. It was like looking at a younger version of himself, or an older version of the portrait of his father that hung in the courthouse. "Sam," Lucas said quietly, "what was your mother's maiden name?" "Whitfield, Sarah Whitfield." Sam looked at him curiously. "Why do you ask?" Lucas felt the world tilt beneath his feet. Sarah Whitfield, the name his father sometimes called out in his sleep. The name Lucas had found written in the margins of old law books from his father's student days. No reason, Lucas managed, just ... making conversation. But as he walked back to his office, Lucas Thorne knew that everything he thought he understood about his family, about his father, and about justice itself, was about to change forever. Night, he began going through his father's old papers, looking for the truth that had been hidden for over 20 years. The midnight oil burned low in Lucas Thorne's office as he spread 30 years' worth of his father's personal papers across his desk. What he'd found in the past week of searching had shaken him to his core, but tonight he'd discovered the final piece of evidence that confirmed his worst suspicions. A yellowed letter, dated 1854, written in his father's distinctive handwriting. "My dearest Sarah, I received word of your condition from your letter. While I am deeply moved by your news, you must understand that my future lies with my practice in Boston and the advantageous marriage my family has arranged. I am enclosing money to help with your situation. Please understand that this must be our final correspondence. Forever, in my thoughts." William Lucas stared at the letter until the words blurred. His father had known about Sam, had known for 20 years that he had another son, and had chosen to abandon him to poverty and hardship. The sound of boots on the stairs interrupted his thoughts. Sam Morrison appeared in the doorway, moving carefully, but no longer favoring his injured back. "Couldn't sleep," Sam said. "Saw your light on. Figured you might be working late on some important case." "You could say that," Lucas replied, quickly, covering the papers. "How are you feeling? Better?" "Good enough to move on, I reckon. Don't want to wear out my welcome." "Where will you go?" Sam shrugged. "North, maybe. Heard there's work in the mining camps up near Helena. A man can disappear. Up there, start fresh." The casual way Sam talked about disappearing again, about returning to the rootless existence that had defined his life, made something snap inside Lucas. "Sam, what if I told you that you don't have to keep running, that you have family here?" Sam looked at him suspiciously. "I'd say you've been drinking too much of your Poss whiskey. I got no family left in this world." Lucas stood and walked to the window, looking out at the courthouse, where his father dispensed his version of justice. "What if I told you that the man who sentenced you to 20 lashes is your father?" The silence that followed was deafening. When Lucas turned back, Sam's face had gone white, his hands clenched into fists at his sides. "That's a hell of a thing to joke about, Lucas." "I'm not joking." Lucas pulled out the letter and handed it to Sam. "Read it." Sam took the paper with trembling hands, his eyes moving across the words slowly. When he finished, he read it again, then a third time. "Sarah Whitfield," Sam whispered. "My mother, Judge William Thorne, is your father, Sam, and that makes you my half-brother." Sam sank into a chair, the letter falling from his nerveless fingers. He knew. All this time, he knew who I was. The resemblance is unmistakable once you know what to look for. We have the same eyes, the same jawline, even the same birthmark. Then why? Sam's voice broke slightly. Why did he let them whip me? His own son. Lucas felt his own anger building, a rage that had been growing for days. Because he's a coward. Because he chose respectability over responsibility 30 years ago, and he's been living with that choice ever since. Sam stood abruptly, pacing to the window. "Does he know that you know?" "Not yet, but he's going to." "No." Sam turned, his grey eyes fierce. "This is my choice to make, Lucas, not yours. Sam, you can't just let this go. You have rights, a claim to what? His money, his name." Sam's laugh was bitter. "I've lived 23 years without William Thorne. I don't need him now. But the town, the people who watched you suffer, they deserve to know what kind of man they've been calling your honor all these years." Sam studied his half-brother's face, seeing the idealism that still lived there, despite years of watching frontier justice. "And what would that accomplish, Lucas? Would it bring back my mother? Would it undo the years I spent wondering why my father didn't want me? It would be justice." "Whose justice?" Yours or mine? The question hung in the air between them as both men grappled with the weight of truth and the price of revealing it. There's something else, Lucas said quietly. Jeremiah Blackwood has been pressuring Father to run you out of town permanently. He's afraid you'll cause more trouble. Let him try. Sam, they could charge you with anything. Vagrancy, disturbing the peace, theft. In this town, Blackwood's word is law, and Father won't protect you. Because he doesn't know I know, Sam said slowly, understanding dawning in his eyes. Exactly. Sam picked up the letter again, staring at his father's handwriting. What are you suggesting? Confront him. Use the truth to protect yourself, and maybe to find some kind of peace. And if he denies it, if he destroys the letter and calls us both liars, Lucas smiled grimly, then we'll find another way. But Sam, you deserve better than running for the rest of your life. And this town deserves better than a judge who would abandon his own blood. The next morning, as Judge William Thorne prepared for another day of dispensing frontier justice, he had no idea that his carefully buried past was about to rise from the grave to demand a reckoning that was 30 years overdue. Judge William Thorne sat behind his massive oak desk in chambers, reviewing cases for the morning session, when his son Lucas walked in without knocking. The older man's pale eyes flicked up with irritation. Lucas, I've told you before about proper protocol. We need to talk, Father, about Sarah Whitfield. The name hit William like a physical blow. His hands went still on the papers, and for a moment, the mask of judicial authority slipped to reveal an old man haunted by choices made long ago. I don't know what you're talking about. Yes, you do. Lucas placed the yellowed letter on his father's desk. I found this in your personal papers, along with several others. William stared at the letter, his face going ashen as he recognized his own handwriting from 3 decades past. When he looked up, his son's eyes held a mixture of disappointment and disgust that cut deeper than any whip. How long have you known? About a week. The resemblance is unmistakable once you see it. Sam Morrison is your son, Father. My half-brother is. William's voice was barely a whisper. Not was, is yes. And you've known it since he arrived in town 6 months ago. William leaned back in his chair, suddenly looking every one of his 63 years. I recognized him the moment I saw him. In my courtroom, he looks exactly like I did at his age, and yet you sentenced him to 20 lashes for defending a child. What choice did I have? William's voice rose, anger replacing resignation. You think I wanted to? You think it didn't tear my heart out to watch my son suffer for my failures? You had every choice. You could have acknowledged him, protected him, shown mercy, and destroy everything I've built here. Ruin your future, your mother's reputation. William stood, pacing to the window that overlooked the town square where Sam had been whipped. I made a choice 30 years ago, Lucas, a selfish, cowardly choice that I've regretted every day since, but I couldn't unmake it without destroying innocent people. Innocent people like Sam. The question hung in the air as the door opened and Sam Morrison stepped inside, his hat in his hands but his spine straight. Both Thornes turned to look at him, and for a moment, the family resemblance was so strong it was startling. I was wondering when you'd work up the nerve to face me, Sam said quietly, his grey eyes fixed on the judge. William Thorne, who had faced down gunfighters and cattle barons without flinching, found himself unable to meet his son's gaze. Samuel, I don't. Sam's voice was controlled but sharp. Don't try to explain away 30 years with pretty words. Then what do you want from me? Sam stepped closer to the desk, his presence filling the room. I want to know why. Why you left my mother to struggle alone. Why you let me grow up thinking my father was too ashamed of me to acknowledge me. Why you watched me get whipped and said nothing. William finally looked up, and Sam saw his own eyes reflected in the older man's face. Because I was a coward. Because I chose the easy path over the right one, and by the time I realized my mistake, it was too late to fix it without hurting more people. It was never too late, Sam said. Every day for 23 years, it wasn't too late. But you chose your reputation over your son. I sent money, blood money, guilt money. Sam's composure finally cracked. Do you know what it's like growing up thinking you're not worth your father's love? Wondering what you did wrong before you were even born? William flinched as if struck. I did love you. I loved your mother. But I was young and ambitious and selfish. Lucas stepped forward. Father, what you did to Sam, to his mother, there's no excuse for it. I know that. William slammed his hand on the desk. Do you think I don't know that? Do you think I haven't paid for it every day since? No, Sam said quietly. You haven't paid for it. My mother paid for it, working herself to death trying to provide for us. I paid for it, working since I was 10 years old to help support us. You got everything you wanted. Successful career, respectable marriage, legitimate son to carry on your name. The room fell silent except for the sound of William's labored breathing. When he spoke again, his voice was broken. What can I do, Samuel? How can I make this right? Sam studied his father's face, seeing the pain there but also the weakness that had defined the man's character. You can't make it right. Some things can't be fixed with money or words or legal documents. Sam placed his hat back on his head. But you can do one thing, anything. You can be a better man going forward. You can use whatever years you have left to actually serve justice instead of just your own interests. Sam turned to leave, then paused at the door. And you can stop protecting men like Jeremiah Blackwood just because they have money and influence. That boy I defended. He was hungry, and his mother was sick. That should have mattered more than Blackwood's pride. After Sam left, William and Lucas sat in silence for a long time. Finally, the judge spoke. He's right, you know, about all of it. Yes, he is. I've wasted so much time, Lucas. Made so many wrong choices. Lucas looked at his father, seeing him clearly for perhaps the first time, not as an intimidating figure of authority, but as a flawed man who had let fear guide his decisions. Then stop wasting time. Father, start making better choices. 6 months later, Judge William Thorne announced his retirement from the bench, citing a desire to pursue other interests. His final case was dismissing all charges against a group of Mexican families accused of vagrancy, ruling that poverty is not a crime, and hunger is not a sin. Sam Morrison never took the Thorne name, but he didn't leave Cedar Falls either. He partnered with Lucas to establish a legal aid practice for those who couldn't afford representation, funded by an anonymous benefactor who some suspected was the retired judge. William Thorne spent his remaining years working quietly with the local church to help struggling families, never speaking publicly about his past, but living as if he were trying to atone for decades of wrong choices. The three men never became a close family, but they found a way to coexist in the same small town, bound together by blood and divided by history, each trying in his own way to build something better from the broken pieces of the past. And in Cedar Falls, Montana Territory, justice began to look a little more like mercy and a little less like revenge served with a whip.